This is my city. These are my people. I've seen a lot of things in this town. Things I don't like. Bad people taking advantage of the weak. Good people down on their luck. Innocent people suffer. I talk to God a lot. Sometimes he talks back. So I ask him, when are you going to do something about all this? You know what his answer was? You wouldn't believe me if I told you. My name is Habakkuk. This is my story. So I went to a rooftop where I could see the whole city. And I waited for God to answer my question. Get a pencil and write this down, he said. Because when you hear what I have to say, you're going to want to tell everybody. God was right. He told me his plans, and I was in awe. I couldn't wait to tell the people they had nothing to worry about. God's in control. I just have to help them see it.
Good morning. It's great to be here. As you heard from my wife last week, I was up fishing with my son. We fish every summer. We go away for 3 or 4 or 5 days, and we head up to the Sierras, Eastern Sierras above Bishop, and find a reason to live back in a tent and have no running water as you do on Tuesday, and no electricity. And we love it, though. You know, we're up there and we're just enjoying it. So my son, when we started, he was just the two of us. He was, I think, going to 3rd grade, and so when we fish, I remember my dad fishing. I think, oh my gosh, how in the world did he do it? Because I'm fishing, but I'm not really fishing. I'm fishing so my son can fish. And so I'm catching fish, but then somehow getting an excuse for him to have the fishing pole so that he can reel the pole things in. And that's how it was for years, but it's not how it is anymore. See, now my son outfishes me easily. And in fact, when I finally caught a fish the second day, and we added to our ice chest, I said, man, we got enough fish for dinner now. He said, yeah, thanks to me, huh? Oh, you punk. Yes, thanks to you, but, you know, and I saw a man with his little son in a little carry case, and he was walking up and down as we were fishing, and I said, don't worry, someday he'll tie your hooks for you, and that's where we're at now, because I can no longer see things correctly, and yet my son does. And so we got to get away. It was great being up there. I'm so glad that Kathy got to be with you last week. She is now in Colorado, so she was here, and now she's gone and coming back, and but great to be here. We've been looking through this book of Habakkuk, and it's kind of a unique book. Most of us may not have heard a lot about this book. It's a little 3-chapter book toward the end of the First Testament that maybe you've just kind of glanced over and never seen, but whether you've been here just this Sunday or you've been the last couple weeks we've been looking through it, it deals with this thing that, as Kathy said, is looking at the dip, going through a time in our life that is just painful. And we've all been there. In fact, a good friend of mine said, there's 3 options with problems. You're either right in the middle of it, you're just getting out of it, or you're about to go into it. And I thought, wow, that's a great morning. Let's close in prayer and head off. No, But we're looking at this book from Habakkuk, and it's talking about this time that was confusing. I don't know if you've ever been in one of these confusing times when you're feeling like, you know, life is hard, and God, I know you could do something, but I'm not sure why you're not doing something. It looks like you're not doing anything, and I'm wondering why you're not stepping in. Because you don't step in, I'm confused, and I got to be honest, I'm even frustrated, and I'm wondering why you're not acting fair. And that was Habakkuk's thing in chapter 1. He was wondering why God wasn't fair. Why wasn't God stepping in and doing what he could do? Because Habakkuk knew that God could do that, but since he wasn't doing it, he wondered why he wasn't being fair. Well, this book Habakkuk, written about 600 BC, it's one of the 12 minor prophets. We don't know much about this Habakkuk guy. We don't know much about the minor prophets. We don't even least about Habakkuk. All we do know is this. The minor prophets heard from God and then spoke to the people. That's what all the prophets did, the minor prophets. Habakkuk was the one who actually heard from God, spoke for God, and then spoke back to God. He was the one of the 12 who had an option to not just speak to the people for God, being God's kind of conduit, but also then turning back to God and saying, God, let's have this dialogue. And I don't know if you ever had that dialogue with God or not. It's a hard place to be, but it's a good place to be. And so in these 3 chapters, we looked at Habakkuk, who has been struggling and wrestling and wondering why God's not stepping in. God speaks to Habakkuk, and he says this, go tell the people, Habakkuk, that they are corrupt. They are sinning. They are in trouble. They are not living the way I want them to. Because of that, I'm going to judge them. And Habakkuk hears that as a prophet. He knows now it's his job to go to the people, tell the people. And he says, you know what, I realize this, God. We are bad people. We are sinful people. We are corrupt. We're vile. We're violent. We are not living the way you want us to live. I understand that. I get that, God. That makes perfect sense. I really don't want to go tell the people because they're not going to be happy hearing the truth. But I understand. I don't like the message, but I understand. You're right. And so I'll step out. But God says, hold on a second. What I'm going to do is this. I'm going to punish my people. I'm going to hold them accountable, which none of us like. As 3-year-olds or as 53-year-olds, we don't like being held accountable. But he says, I'm going to hold them accountable. But he holds them accountable in the strangest way. He says, I'm going to take some people who are worse than you and have them rule over you. And Habakkuk says, God, I want to talk back here for a second. That doesn't make sense. I understand that we're not living the way you want us to. We're not living the life you want us to. But the Babylonians, they're worse than us. They're the worst of anyone. Why would you take these horrible people and have them come and rule over us, bad people? I don't get it. It doesn't seem fair. I'm not sure why you're doing it. And God, I don't like it. I don't understand why you're not fair. He's going through a season called a dip. And for the dip, for us, it's like life kind of began for me when I met Christ. Now, I lived before Christ, but my life really began when I met Christ. Whether you met him when you were a child or an adult or have not met him yet, God desires you to meet him and know him and find how much he loves you and have your life truly begin. He designed us to live forever, and forever begins when we begin that relationship with him. He wants us to know him and know how much he loves us. And in that starting point, life kind of moves up, and it's so nice when life begins to move forward. As I got to know Christ, life began to make sense. Maybe it did for you too. Things that used to confuse you began to be okay. You heard that the chapel was a praying chapel, and you thought, well, that's kind of weird. But when you get to know Christ, you begin praying, and you begin to see answers to prayer. You're like, this is amazing that God actually hears. You open your Bible and you read it, and you go, this is not like just an old ancient history book. This is like God speaking to me. I'm getting something. I'm underlining things, and I'm hearing things. I go to church, and at church I hear a word, and I go, that was God's word just for me. How did God know that I needed to hear that today? You talk with your friends, and the light begins to go on, and life begins to move this trajectory of forward and up. You're like, I've never known life like this. A life that's purposeful, a life that's meaningful, a life that is freeing and healing. I'm broken free from bondage. I used to live with behaviors and addictions and thoughts, and I'm living this new life, and it's going up, 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 and it's great. But the reality is, life does not always go up. There comes a point in your life, even as a new Christian, where you think, God, I prayed and why didn't you answer? God, I used to pray for that parking spot in the busy parking lot, and you'd open up parking spaces, and now it's like you don't care. God, there's conflict in my church, and I don't get it. Why would there be conflict in a church? And God, I'm having struggles with this, and I'm wondering why the life is going down. I want to go back when it was moving up. But the reality is, problems come. Jesus gave us a promise. In this world, he said, you will have trouble. Not you might have trouble. In this world, you will have trouble. I don't like that kind of prophetic word. I like a word that is that life is going to be great. But when Jesus says you'll have trouble, and he's always right, and there's a dip, and we have to wonder, like Habakkuk wondered, God, why are you letting this happen? Chapter 1 was all about this idea of God, why aren't you fair? Why aren't you stepping in? Why aren't you doing something? Why are you letting this horrible thing happen, that you're taking these horrible people worse than us and letting them rule over us? It doesn't make sense. And that's where chapter 1 ended. And it was a morning you thought, Scott, thanks so much for the great word, that life is hard. I didn't know that before, but thank you for reminding me that. I'm glad there was music that morning, because I need something to redeem that message. And then Kathy came last Sunday and talked about chapter 2. And in Habakkuk 2, God says to Habakkuk, I want you to be quiet, which most of us don't like. Some of us do like, but most of us don't like being quiet. And he said, listen. Be quiet and listen. Those two tend to go together. It's hard for me to listen when I'm talking. Sometimes I'm quiet here, but man, it's so busy up here. And you're talking to me and we're having an argument, and I'm already getting my response ready to go to just to fire onto you. But to be quiet and listen, because God tells Habakkuk, I want to speak. And he says, Habakkuk, take notes. Write this down. And wait. And as my wife shared with you, the Kirks are not fans of waiting. I do not like waiting. I detest going to grocery stores and having to choose a line, because whatever line I choose will be the one that waits the most. It does not matter which one I choose. Choose another one and you'll be faster. I don't like waiting at red lights. I get frustrated when the light goes to the circle and they somehow miss me. I was in the left-hand turn lane and they missed me, and now it's the other turn left. And I go, where did my turn? I'm going to have to wait another 30 seconds. It's gonna totally ruin my day. But God says, Habakkuk, I want you to write this down so you'll remember it. And I want you to wait. Wait for me. Ah, man, that waiting time is hard. We have a list of prayer requests today, and that some of our good friends are waiting right now. And it's not easy to wait. But God says, Habakkuk, I need you to wait. I want you to get to chapter 3 is where we're at today, where you're going to realize that I can do something amazingly wonderful and beautiful, and it's going to blow you away, because that's who I am. I am God, and I can do things that it'll shock you. The circumstance that you're in may not change. It may still be tough. You may still be captured by the Babylonians, taken away, and ruled over by these horrible people. But if you'll question and wait and trust, I'll take you someplace you've never been before. And here's the reality. I want that kind of intimate faith, but I don't want to go through the situation to get there. I want that closeness with God that I've never had before, but if I can avoid the difficult times, I'll take that every day. But God says, sometimes I work best in the hard times. Take your faith to a whole new level you can't imagine. It's like the book of James in the New Testament, where James said, consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds. What a crazy statement. Consider it joy when you face trials. That does not make sense. That's not the kind of advice I want from you. You know, it's going to be okay. No, it's not. But it says, consider it joy when you face trials, because you know the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. I want to be not lacking anything, but I don't want perseverance, because perseverance means that I'm going to struggle. Perseverance means that I'm going to be at a loss for air. Perseverance means that my muscles are going to ache. My spiritual muscles, my emotional muscles, my mental muscles are going to ache. And I don't want to ache. But in order to gain perseverance, I must go through the pain in order to gain the perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so you can be mature and complete, not lacking anything. So you should, when you come to trials, which make your muscles hurt, which develop perseverance, James, the brother of Jesus, says, you should consider it joy. I'm not quite there yet. But that's where I want to be, to say, God, this is not happy, but this is joy. I want intimate faith with you. And I guess I'm willing to allow you to make me faithful. Which means I have to be stretched to get there. So chapter 3, where we're at today, and our closing of Habakkuk, Habakkuk starts by saying this, Lord, I have heard your fame. Basically, he's had a Q&A with God, and now it's time for him to pray. And he prays this, Lord, I have heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds, Lord. Repeat them in our day, in our time, make them known. In wrath, remember mercy. Basically, this is, God, I need your help. That's sometimes the most amazing prayer you can pray. Help. It doesn't have to be a fancy, long, drawn-out prayer. It can just be, God, help. Here he says, God, basically, revive. God, take care of me. God, bring new life to me. It was like my son and I when we were starting a fire. Neither one of us are Boy Scouts, but we know how to start fires. Guys, remember, even if maybe you're 67 years old, but you begin in a fire pit, and somehow you're 12 years old again. We like fire. I don't know what it is. I like it. And it's like, I want to be in charge of it. And I want to blow into it. I want to make sure there's oxygen underneath. And when my son built the fire and it smoked out, and we had to revive it again. We had to find a way to get oxygen in there. And that's what he's praying. God, would you revive the fire in me? Because I'm almost done. I'm going through this hard time. I'm in the dip, and I need you to revive me again. So God, I've heard of your fame. God, I know how awesome you are. God, I stand in awe of your deeds. He can say, God, I see it all. I know it all. But God, I need you to do something here. Would you do it again? I know you've done great things in the past, God. I know all the things you've done for me. I can remember. And if I sit time and think about it, I can remember what you did when I was 12, when I was 15. Oh my gosh, I was a wreck when I was 20. I never should have lived to be 21. But God, you got me through that. So God, now that I'm 70, would you do it again? Would you do it again, God? Step in and do something in my life that will make me realize you. And God, I know, we like praying for mercy. But I think he's kind of thinking, God, you're right. We're pretty screwed up people. But God, in your wrath, would you remember mercy? God, I know you're a loving God, so would you give me mercy? And here's the crazy thing. God doesn't just give us mercy, he gives us grace. Mercy is this amazing where you don't get what you deserve. You deserve punishment, and you don't get punishment. Grace is you deserve punishment, but you get a reward. That's the kind of God we had. He loves to walk us through the season, and it feels like it's punishment, but it's actually in his grace bringing us to a new place. And his grace for the people of Judah was great. He wanted to draw them back to him. And he's going to use even these Babylonians, the worst of the worst, to let them to walk through that season, him staying with them, protecting them, but bringing them to a place where they would know who he was and who he is. And so Habakkuk says, God, would you do it again? Would you step in and do the things I know you can do? So let me talk about the dip. What do you do when you're in the dip? I'd love to have you walk away with 3 things, very simple, not easy. Very simple, but not easy. But things we can do when we're feeling like we're in that dip of life where life is hard and we're confused and we're frustrated, saying, God, why won't you step in? I've been waiting, I've been writing it down, but I don't know what to do now. God, I want to move forward. First thing, it's actually moving back. Would you remember what God has done? I love what happens at the chapel. So we don't often plan this, but God steps in. Kathy was here just a moment ago. She said, can you say the statement again about when you're facing fear, what you can do?
Yeah, you can forget everything and run, or you can face everything and rise.
Wow. Anybody like to forget and run?
Yeah.
Man, that's me. I love to forget and run. I love to just find anything to avoid thinking about that moment. As a guy, I don't like fear. I think as a woman, you don't like fear. We don't like, as humans, we don't like being out of control. And when we feel out of control, we have a tendency, rather than embracing it, to try to do something else, to stay busy, to do something to get out of there and not think about it. Habakkuk says we need to remember what God has done. We need to look back, remember what God has done, so we can move forward. There's power the way God wired us. God wired us incredible. You can be driving back to your house today, and if you have a really fancy golf cart with a radio on it, which I know some of you do. Everyone has dogs, not everyone has radios on there. But those may be a song that comes on. And it may be a song by the Beatles, or maybe a song by Chicago, REO Speedwagon, some sappy, crazy love song from your past. And in that moment, you can be back and suddenly be 12 years old again at the skating rink for that first couple skating with that sweetheart of yours who may not even know you anymore. You may not even found her on Facebook or him on Facebook. But that moment, you're 12 years old again, and you remember that moment like it was yesterday. Even though you haven't worn skates in 50 years, you remember it like yesterday. Or you can walk into a room and with a scent, you can be brought back to your 5-year-old child walking into your grandmother's house and her baking cookies. That smell can take you back there like that. It doesn't have to be good smells. I know friends who are farmers. They say, oh, the smell of manure, that just takes me back. But are you kidding me? But the way God has wired us, that smell, that memory brings them back, and they're back there again. And it's like, oh man, that was such great times. It smells like and it's there. God wired our minds to remember, and there's power there. And the important thing is to remember back like David did, who said, God protected me from the lion, and the bear and this giant will be no different. Habakkuk, 600 years before Christ shows up on the scene in a human body, fully God, fully man, says, you need to remember what God has done. Remember and embrace. Remember God's faithfulness. Remember God's character. Remember God's goodness. These will be visible, tangible, spiritual memories that will take you to a new place. And you'll be able to see that even in the midst of this horrible time, that God brought you through it before, and maybe he could do it again. It says there, God came to Teman, the Holy One of the mountain Paran. His glory covered the heavens, and his praises filled the earth. Habakkuk writes, his splendor was like the sunrise. Rays flashed from his hand where his power was hidden. Plague went before him. Pestilence followed his steps. He stood and shook the earth. He looked and made the nations tremble. The ancient mountains crumbled, and the age-old hills collapsed. But he marches on forever. God, I know you're bigger than this, so I'm going to trust that you're going to get me through this. I'll remember what you've done. This week I was camping, and it's amazing what sights and scenes can do. We fish up above Bishop, and my son and I go every summer. This summer we weren't sure where we were going to go because the campsite was booked, and especially in the sites we like. And so as I was out of town, my wife and my son were on the computer looking, and I said, Jake, maybe we should go somewhere else. Where do you want to go to? He goes, no, Dad, we've got to go here. This is our place. And there's something awesome about your boy saying that's our place. I dedicate a week, a year is what we give, 4 days usually, and yet now that's our place. And it's just amazing that's that memory being built. And really one of the coolest things about it is that was not just our place, but that was actually my place with my dad and my grandfather back when I was a kid. And so, we went as kids, the same place, right across from Tom's place, Tough Campground. We camped there, and it's just a spot, but it's become kind of special. And the stream changes, rivers change, but it's still kind of the same. We sit there, and I remember catching fish when I was a kid. I remember watching my daughter catch her first fish there, my son, and now he's tying my hooks and catching fish for me, not fishing me. But there was one morning where I went walking, and I was going to share this until this morning as I was walking. The power of memory. I'm walking along, and I get this wave of sadness come over me. I don't do sadness. My wife and I talk, and we realize that I kind of have two speeds. I have calm and angry. And in an option of things that are bad, you have an option of being sad or being angry, and I choose angry every day because anger for me is easier than sadness. Sadness is a place of being out of control. I don't like that. I'd much rather be angry. And I've got to be honest, growing up and going through this time with a father who was doing his best to try and be a loving dad, but had some issues on his own with his family, which he raised over to me, I don't have the issue with my dad that my son has with me. And I wish I did. And I've always kind of pushed that off, saying, oh, he's not capable, and I'm just getting angry at him, and I move forward. But for this day, on this walk in the campground, flooded by the places that I've been as a kid, I'm suddenly sad to the point where I go, I'm going to stinking cry, and my wife's not even here to help me. You know, I'm just sad, and I'm overwhelmed with sadness, or what it feels like I didn't get that I wanted. That I don't even know how to put that into words, but I was there, transported that moment. And I don't know why God allowed me to walk through that, other than there's something I need to work on and figure something out. So I called a good friend of mine. I said, hey, can I talk sometime? Because I really respect you. I'd love to kind of figure out how to wrestle through this and how to fix this. I want to fix it. I may not be fixable, but I want to begin to work on it, not just push it aside. I'd rather push it aside and move forward, but I need to face it. So you're going to pray for me. That's my prayer. But, you know, this morning as I was getting ready to drive, I didn't plan on using the message, but I'm driving, and my son... my wife has gone to Colorado, and we used to have 2 daughters at home. Now we have my daughter home from college. We've gone from having 3 kids in the house to now having 8 kids in the house. That doesn't make sense because 2 of them moved out, but we have 1 son with 7 friends, and now there are 8 kids in the house. And they're usually only overnight. They drink all of our milk, they eat all of our food, but they're great kids. And as I looked this morning, as I was walking out the house with these kids all strewn around the house, you know, asleep in different rooms, different beds, different floor spaces, and I realized, you know, my son's not a part of a youth group right now, and not a church group. He hasn't connected with that group, and I'm really kind of sad about that because he needs that. He comes to church with us, but he's not a part of a group. And as I was driving this morning, I put on my Bluetooth and I called my wife. I said, honey, you know what? I realized Jake doesn't have a youth group, but we kind of have a youth group at our house. And as I looked this morning, walking out with these boys, these 16-year-old boys, or 18-year-old bodies, and with like sometimes 10-year-old minds. But half of these kids are living in single-family homes. They're coming from divorce. And I think, maybe, I don't know, God, maybe you want me to remember so I can move forward. Maybe this is a group for these guys. So I don't know, but it's important in a season like Habakkuk is, and maybe you're in, to remember that God is there, and God has worked, and God can do great things. So remember what God has done. Remember what God has done and say, God, I just got to at least acknowledge that you're a capable God. Second thing, would you accept what God is doing? Would you accept what he's doing? That's crazy talk. Because remember, he's getting ready to be taken into captivity, but he's basically, as I summarize, he's saying, God, I want to accept what you're doing because I got to admit, we deserve it. I don't understand it, but, we've lived against your ways, and I'm going to accept that somehow you can work in this. And so he writes, I heard, and my heart pounded. Habakkuk writes, my lips quivered at the sound. Decay crept into my bones, and my legs trembled. Yet I will wait patiently for the day of calamity to come on the nation invading us. God, I'll trust that somehow you're in the middle of this. That's easy to say when our life is cruising along fine and we're not in the dip. But when I'm in the dip, I don't like hearing that. Everything's going to be okay. That's not the promise. He's not saying everything's going to be okay. He's just saying, God, I'll trust that you're in the middle of this and you're never going to leave me. And I wish I had a better word than that. I really wish I had just a happy word. But the truth is, and the great word is that, God, you're there in the middle of it. Even though it doesn't make sense, you're there, and I'm going to trust you. And Habakkuk says, God, I was wondering, and I was waiting, and now I'm going to trust that you're going to do something. I'm actually going to worship you. I'm going to move from whining to waiting to actually worshiping. That's where I want to get to. I want to get to the place of worship. Now, I can fake the worship up here, and sometimes I have to fake the worship. Does that make sense? I have to kind of fake it until I make it. I have to come in, and sometimes I come to church, I go, I don't really want to be here. But they're singing, so I'll just kind of start singing like I really mean the words. You know what? The words transform me, because worship transforms me. But I've got to start by just making an action. And that waiting period to get to the place of God, I want to truly have that deep worship. But sometimes it has to start when I don't even feel it, and I'll move into it until you help me to feel it. And even if I don't ever feel it, I'm going to move forward because I know you're faithful. I know it here. I may not know it here, but I'm going to trust you. I'm going to move forward because I want to accept what you're doing. Gets to the final place where we actually trust what God will do. Boy, that's a great place. I've seen that in some of my friends. I've got friends who are in their 20s who are living this. Our pastor at our home church, before they started their church, they made the announcement in front of the mother church they were going to start, and the next day his wife was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. The next day. And I'm kind of going, okay, God, that doesn't make any sense at all. Here's a family that's going to give all of it up, a regular paid job in a big church, to go and start a church with a small group that may not even make it. But he's taken the faith step. He and his wife are taking this amazing faith step. And the next day, the diagnosis of cancer. And I go, I don't get it, God. And they didn't get it either. But they waited. And they wrestled. And they came to a place of worship where she was able to say, I thank God for this cancer. And I thought, that's like blasphemy. That doesn't make sense. But she said, this brought me to a much deeper place than I've ever been with God. She's now cancer-free, but I believe she was at a place where Lauren would have said that, cancer-free or not cancer-free. In fact, she said that before she had the diagnosis of being cancer-free, that she thanked God for this cancer. And Chase kind of shook his head. He couldn't get it how his wife could be there. But God brought them together, and they said, God, I'll trust you. I'll trust you. I'll jump into your arms. I'll be like a little kid on the edge of a pool, and the dad saying, jump to me, and you're like, I don't know. My dog would jump to me no matter what. But for me to jump to my dad, not so sure. It takes a trust relationship, and God's saying, would you trust that I'll do something great? And so he writes this. Though the fig trees do not bud, he admits there's no fruit on the tree. Even though there's no fruit on the tree. Not like I see parts of it, I see a budding thing. No, there's no fruit on the tree. That's the situation. Though the fig tree does not bud, and there are no grapes on the vine. The vines are there, but there are no grapes, no fruit. He looks and says, you know what? Even though there's no fig, there's no fruit, and though the olive crop fails, and the fields produce no food, this is all bad news. This is a bad diagnosis. Your son brings this update for you for a school grade. You go, you know what? This is a bad progress report. This is not good. There's no fig tree. There's no grapes. There's no olives. The fields aren't producing food. There's no sheep in the pen. There's no cattle in the stalls. There's nothing. This is a bad time. There's no food. Then he writes 2 words. Actually 3 words. Yet I will. Yet I will. We may know that as a conjunction, but. There's nothing but this. He says, even though there's none of this, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God, my Savior. He says, I don't understand it, God. The Babylonians are going to wreck us up. I don't like that. I don't get it. I see it coming. I know it's coming. Yet I will. Yet I will. I don't know what your sentence looks like. Even though my spouse broke her promise, even though my husband wasn't faithful, yet I will. Even though my kids were raised to be godly kids and now they're making some crazy choices, scary choices, yet I will. Maybe your sentence is, even though finances are tough, yet I will. Even though you seem far away, God, even though it seems like you're not answering my prayers, I'm praying and I don't feel like you're listening. Yet I will. Even though I don't like it, even though I don't understand it, even though I know you could and you should, but you're not, yet I will be joyful and rejoice in the Lord, my Savior. Even though, yet I will trust you, God. See, I want a chapter 3 kind of faith. I want to move from the whining in chapter 1. I want to move through the waiting in chapter 2 because I really don't like waiting. And I want to get to a place where I can actually worship, where I can move beyond waiting and say, God, I'm going to trust that you're going to get something done here. I trust that you'll do something in the dip that you can't do on the mountaintop. God, I will trust that even though I don't see you, I know who you are, I know what you're capable of, I know what you can do, and I've seen you in the past, and so I will wait and I will trust. And I've seen it in my life, and you've seen it in your life too. But in the dip, it's hard to see. Great thing is, God brings friends to help us in the dip. To sit down there with them, to not preach at them, because I don't want to be preached at when I'm in the dip. I want to be hugged and loved and say, you know what, I don't get it either, but I'm here with you. And God said he'd never leave us. So I'm here waiting. And I'll trust and I'll lean forward. I've walked with Jesus for enough yesterdays to know what's going to happen tomorrow. And so have you. But in the middle of the dip, it's hard to see it. You know how God's been with you in the past, so you know you can trust him in the future. And the real challenge is this: to pray and say, God, in this experience, would I hold on to you? See, it says, the sovereign Lord is my strength, he writes. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He enables me to go on the heights. And the picture of hinds feet on high places, of the deer moving from place to place, moving in ways that we can't move. I don't know if you've ever seen a deer run away. They just jump over fences. They don't go around it. They just hop over it. They just move forward, nimble and free, and able to go to the high places. And that's what he's saying. God, you want to do me? You want to take me to the high places. You want to make my feet like the feet of a deer, enable me to go on to the heights. Man, I love the heights. When I'm in the pit, I can't even see the height. But God wants to take me to the place of the height. And the word there that is the whole crux of the matter is that word sovereign. That word sovereign, that means that God is in control, that God really is able. He is in control and doing things that we can't imagine. He's the God who can take a barren fig tree and produce figs, who can bring grapes, who can bring cattle and sheep. He has the cattle on all the hills. And so my job is to be still and quiet and trust him and find that he'll be my strength. So here's Habakkuk. That word Habakkuk, his name literally means wrestle. It means grapple. It means maybe from Europe in the south, it's wrestle. Would you wrestle with God? Which means, would you hold on and say, God, I'm not letting go. I'm angry at you right now, but I'm not letting go. God, I'm frustrated, but I'm not letting go. God, I'm not even sure you're here, but I'm not letting go. I'm going to hold on, and I'm going to fight like I've never fought before. Like Jacob, I'm going to hold on, I'm going to wrestle, I'm going to grapple. And that's what chapter 1 looks like. I'm just going to wrestle. And even when you're waiting, you're still wrestling. It's more passive, but you're still wrestling. To get to the place of chapter 3 where you say, God, now, with my heart and my mind, I really can worship you. I can say, I love you, Lord, and I lift my voice to worship you. Maybe this morning you say, God, I'm not so sure about that. I like you, Lord, and I think you're cool. But you get to that place where you say, God, I do love you. And I'm not letting go, even though this situation doesn't look good. And I like to make it look nice. But it's just kind of a mess. But I'll wrestle and I'll wait to worship. And that's what's so great about the Rancho Chapel, that we can worship together and we can wrestle together. And when you are a mess, someone else will be strong. So that when they're a mess, God can use you to be strong for them. Not to fix it, but to sit in the midst of it with them and wait through the process and let them go to a place where they can worship God. Let me pray for us. God, I thank you for this morning. I thank you for the fact that you can take us to new heights that we've never maybe even experienced before. You can do all this, God, because you've done it before. And we're asking, even as Habakkuk did, would you do it again, God? Would you revive us again? Would you bring our faith to a deeper level than it's been before? Would you allow us to wait on you, to wrestle with you? And even though there's no fig on the tree and there's no grapes on the vine, and there's no sheep, there's no cattle, there's no field, there's nothing, God, we know that you're with us. And for my friends right now, God, who are struggling, I pray that you would make yourself known to them in some ways that they've never seen before. Would you remind them of your presence? And God, would you help us around right now who you want to use to be you in the flesh for them, that we might truly love one another, that this might be a loving place, that people would say, I don't know about those people at the chapel, I don't know what they believe, but man, they really love each other. God, that's what you wanted your disciples to be, to have love for one another. The world would know that we're your disciples as we love each other. Would you help us to love each other through the good times and the bad times, walking and wrestling, waiting so we might truly worship you. In Jesus' name, amen.